Well, hello everyone.
Hi.
So glad that you joined us tonight, and I am sitting here with LaDonna Pearson. And you guys, this is the first time she's ever shared her testimony, so please stay tuned. I asked her about it, and God was dealing with me and dealing with her about it as well, because it was time to share her testimony. The Bible says we're made an overcomer by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. So this is going to just stretch you so much, LaDonna. I know it is.
It is.
But I just can't wait to share. So I said, so LaDonna, she said, which part do you want to share? And I said, well, when you were addicted to prescription drugs. And what did you say?
I said, no, it wasn't prescription drugs. Mine were illegal drugs.
Illegal drugs. Okay, so with that, I know I've got your interest. Sometimes, LaDonna, we judge the book by its cover. And you see this classy lady in the lobby and just at church, and, oftentimes we can judge what we don't understand, right? But she's relatable to you, and she has been through it. She does not look like what she's been through. I'm just going to tell you that right now. So we're going to get into her testimony. So the name of our devotion is called The Highest Point. Now we are sitting at the base of Mount Everest. So I want you to look up. Look at that.
Beautiful.
Isn't that beautiful? Wow. I thought I lost you. Well, it's like 5.5 miles high. And there has been, LaDonna, like 310 on record that have lost their life trying to get to the highest point on earth. That's the highest point above sea level. So oftentimes, before we get to the highest point, we're going to find out what her journey has been all about. We have to go to the lowest. And so we're going to get into her testimony. So tell me, LaDonna, what happened when you were 15 years old?
Well, I thought I was in love, and I ran off and got married.
At 15?
At 15.
Did your parents approve of that?
No, they didn't. And they didn't approve even after we were married and through my life with him.
Okay. So what happened in this marriage? 11 years...
11 years of marriage, and it was very different than what I was raised in, while my family was also, I would say, dysfunctional. His was as well, so a very different lifestyle compared to what I was brought up in, but a lot of infidelity. And a lot of, and that's what led us into drugs eventually. We had a business that was placing video games in bars, basically. And it was a very good business as far as the income, but you ran into a lot of different types of people in those bars. And often there were people in the bars dealing drugs. Mm-hmm. And my husband decided it would be a very good way, maybe of making extra money, and we got involved in drugs. So,
can you tell us what kind of drugs?
It started out with pot, as many people do when they decide to have an adventure, and of course, eventually, when you think, well, pot's not that bad, and it's actually pretty great, then
it was a high.
Yeah, it was a high, and then you start hearing about other things, and there's more money in this, and a high demand for that, and eventually you're selling, cocaine and speed and other things, and
because you shared, once you get that first high, you can never get that, right? And so
right.
you're trying to get to that highest point in the drugs, right? To get you to that next high.
Yes, the first time you do cocaine, and if you read about it, it says that it's the most addictive, and you're addicted as soon as you try it. And that will vary with people, but it's very truthful that most people have such a desire for it, and you will never reach that high that you did the first time again, and you're always striving for that.
Now, LaDonna, you got very sick, Crohn's disease.
Yes.
Tell us about that. For all the stress that was put upon you.
This was before the drugs.
Oh, before the drugs,
before
okay.
The drugs, yeah. But my husband, like I said, he was not faithful, and I knew that he was doing things that he shouldn't, and you know, seeing other women, but I couldn't prove it, or anyway. He would turn it around and say, "Oh, well, you're the one, you know, running around," and the worry and the stress finally created. I became very ill with Crohn's disease, and that was a journey in itself. With trying to learn to be well after all the medications, and you were still in a lot of pain, and still dealing with trying to work, and but winding up in the hospital very sick.
Okay, so tell me, when you were selling drugs, because now you expressed how that every bit of money you made, you just thought about the drugs, right? That it had to supply the addiction.
Yes. Well, that's why you worked, because eventually when, you're addicted and it gets worse as you go on, and what you're working for is drugs, and you eventually forget, you don't care about anything. You don't care about your family. You don't care about yourself, actually, but you don't care if you have a place to live or paying the rent, because everything that you're seeking is in that high.
Wow.
And so your money goes for that, even though you know you have rent to pay or a phone bill to pay or electric. My electric was turned off many times.
Tell me that you were even homeless for a space of time. Tell us about that experience.
Well, most of my time without a home or homeless was not spent out in the woods or anything. I did sleep in the park a few nights. But,
wow.
And that was scary. But I found friends that had a place, and they were drug addicted as well. So they were just fortunate enough that they had not lost their home yet. And I don't know how they stayed. They still had a home, but I would stay with other people. You
told me about an instance where you were going to meet someone because you were selling drugs, and how God protected you from going to prison. Tell us about this. Yeah, there were many, once you start doing drugs, you often sell drugs because that is a form of income, and that's the people you're connected with. So I was selling drugs, and it was, I don't remember how much in my possession, but I know I would have gone to prison. But I had set up a cell, and I was supposed to meet this man at a gas station at a certain place and at a certain time, and I was running late, and I'm sure it was because I was too busy getting high. And once you reach that high, you think, oh, well, just one more. I've got time for one more. Wow. It's always one more. And you never can get high enough. But I finally said, I've got to go, made myself leave and go to meet him. And I was 30 minutes late, I know. And I pulled up, and the place was swarming with cops. Wow. And I thought, oh, dear God. And I knew instantly that they were there for me. They had, I know that it was set up that they were going to arrest me in lieu of him. And I think it was probably, so that he wouldn't get as much time as I did. I can imagine they wouldn't expect it to be you when you drove up. So you had a pretty good cover. Well, classy little lady here. There was times that I walked out with pounds of pot when we first started in selling pot, and it was wintertime, and I had a fur coat on and walked out of a bar where we had picked it up from. And they said, well, who's going to take this out? Because it was quite a large container of it. And I said, well, I'll just put it under my coat. And I wrapped it up in my coat, my stomach, and walked out the door. And if I'd been caught again, I would have been in prison. Wow. So you talked about, because they owned a bed and breakfast along with other businesses, 7 days a week, long hours, and you said no time for God. Yeah. But began to, even, this was after you were free from drugs, right? Oh, yes. Or after you went to your parents? Actually a different marriage. Oh, different marriage. Yeah. Okay, so it was quite a ride. But marriage too. You were on your way down, though. You said you hit rock bottom
Yes.
before you reached out to God, and you knew He was the only way.
Yes.
Tell me about that. What happened?
Well, it was probably, the drugs was a very difficult time in my life, and it was, again, that's the only way that I overcame the drugs. I didn't go to rehab or anything, but I overcame the drugs by God, but we often slip back into things that doing and in the places that we shouldn't be. But anyway, at the time that I had fallen away from God again, and we had the business of bed and breakfast, and my husband was an alcoholic. We had been there for a few years with the business, and it was long hours and difficult, and he ended up leaving, and I was still running the business there. I had buyers, kind of people that were interested in my business, and they came by, and I agreed to sell it. And through this process of the paperwork and everything, my son died.
Wow.
And sorry, my son died July 31st of 2015. And through that time, I'd already agreed to sell the inn. Lost my son within 6 weeks. I had to not only sign the paperwork and everything of selling my business, I had to move, physically move, because my home was part of the inn. It was a cottage, separate from the inn, but it was still on the property, so I had to be out of that facility.
You talked about suicide, and I thought this was interesting, and it really makes sense. You said suicide rarely is intentional when you're addicted to drugs. Right. And, can you share with us about that?
Yeah, that high that we were talking about, you always want more and more, and you don't realize that you're going overboard. You're actually getting too much, and you don't realize it. And when one thing stops giving you that high, you're going to find something else to make you go a little bit higher. And so you start mixing cocaine and speed and some alcohol, and sometimes a little bit of legal prescription drugs.
Yeah.
But with that, you do other things to reach a high, and so you get more than what you think.
Yes.
And that's where you end up taking your own life, and you don't even realize.
LaDonna, because you said when you hit rock bottom, because before we can go to that highest point, now we're talking about spiritual, right? We know, and you're serving God with all your heart now, and God is using your life for His glory, and you have reached the highest point. But you know what? There are higher heights and deeper depths in God.
Yes.
So no matter how high you go in this world, no matter how high the mountain is, God is higher still. But yet He lives inside of our heart when we invite Him in. So you got to that bottom, that lowest place at the base of the mountain, if you will. And what happened? You surrendered your life to God. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, well, I think with the loss of my son, and my husband wasn't there at the time, I just was devastated with everything that was happening, and I didn't have the first 6 weeks, I really didn't have time to grieve. But once I got into another house, and I was just grieving, I could hardly get out of bed, and I found TCT on TV and met Debbie through that.
I had no idea. Wow.
I was watching her before I ever met her. And anyway, I started just saturating myself with God. Wow. And I could feel His Spirit just helping me to get through.
So,
each day.
LaDonna, you have been high in the natural with,
Yes.
with toxic drugs, really. I mean, you became addicted. But what would you say, I mean, because you have God, you have the peace of God in your life. You can't even compare it to a drug at all, right?
No, it's much better than a drug.
You can lay down at night and have peace in your heart, that if he was to come for you in the middle of the night, you would go with him. And it's not that longing for the forbidden or just the next fix. I love this. Psalms 40:2 says, he lifted me out of the pit of despair, out of the mud and the mire. He set my feet on solid ground and steadied me as I walked along. You talk about the highest point. Let him lift you up from where you're at. Yes. Psalms 3:3-4 says, but you, O Lord, are a shield for me, my glory and the one who lifts up my head. I cried to the Lord with my voice, and he heard me from his holy hill, that high place. So, like I said earlier, we judge what we don't understand. And you didn't feel the judgment of God. You felt the love of God. Right? He didn't say, you bad girl, but you felt the overwhelming presence of God and his love. Ephesians 3:17-19 says, then Christ will make his home in our hearts as you trust in him. Your roots will grow down into God's love and keep you strong. And may you have the power to understand, as all God's people should, how wide, how long, how high, and how deep his love is. May you experience the love of Christ. Though it is too great to understand fully, then you will be made complete with all the fullness of life and power that comes from God. So I'm going to ask you, because your parents, I know, prayed for you, when you were out there. What would you say out in the world? But what would you say even to parents that their children are wayward, that their children are addicted to drugs, and you're thinking, God, when are you going to, just apprehend their hearts? I know they've got to get to that lowest place. There was a song that says, sometimes we have to be knocked down to make us look upward. So what would you say to the parents?
Well, sometimes it takes getting to their lowest point before they are going to surrender to God and decide that they're not going to live like this anymore. And it was the same thing for me when I was involved in drugs. Eventually, you're going to die if you don't stop it. And God actually told me that I was going to die if I did this one more time. I was driving in my car, and I actually heard like an audible voice saying to me, if you do this again, you're going to die.
Wow.
And I know it was God. There was no one in the car with me. So you have to be patient. You have to show them love. I know there's a lot of times you have to do tough love, but trying to hold them close but yet firm.
Without shame and disapproval.
Right. The shame and disapproval, I felt that anyway. So I think, I don't know if everyone does. I think they do, because they know that what they're doing is not approved of.
Right.
It's illegal. And the shame and disapproval is going to turn them away from you. So showing them that you love them no matter what.
That's
Sometimes we can't give money because you know what they're going to do with it.
Yes.
But there's other ways of showing love and walking through it with them and being their support system. And them knowing that you're not going to shame them when it comes down to if they need you. They're in trouble, and they may go out and do it again. You don't know. But eventually, just keep praying. Just showing love is all you can do.
God's presence is not the high that destroys you, but the high that restores you.
Yes.
I'm telling you, and takes you higher than you've ever been. Yes. That highest point. You will just be excited to wake up the next day and have another day to live, right? Yes. And live for the Lord. I'm going to ask LaDonna if she would pray for you listening.
Yes. Father, I thank you.
Thank
you for everyone that's listening. I thank you for my church and my church family. Father, you are our strength. You are the one that guides us. I ask you just to touch every life out there that they're going through struggles, whether it's the parents or the children, Father. Let them know that you're there for them. Let them feel your comfort and your arms around them and guiding their steps, Father. Bring them back to you. Reunite the families and break those those horrible words that have been said. Let them realize that life is so short, Father, but you give us life. And we need to just love each other. Just let them feel your love and bring the families back together, Father. And we thank you for all that you do and all that you are in our lives. Amen.
Thank you, Jesus. Well, thank you. This took a whole lot. And I'm telling you what, God is He's going to do amazing things, and He is through you.
Yes.
Would you throw her up some hearts, please? Listen, God loves you today. We love you, and have a great rest of your day, all right? Bye-bye.
Bye.